Good day, good afternoon, good night. How you doing? This is MCM and you're listening to You're Probably Right. Today we are going to have a serious conversation. Well, maybe not a serious conversation, but there's going to be a serious talk happening here. Now, of course, I'm only doing the talking, but just stay tuned.
Maybe your stupid opinions aren't right. And are you so sure your life is going so much the way you want it to go, and you're such a bloody paragon of virtue, and the light is shining out every orifice, and everyone who disabuses you of your notions is evil?
Good evening, y'all. Good afternoon, good night, good morning, good day. It is I, MCM, and you are listening to another amazing episode, of You're Probably Right podcast. All right, I'm going to talk about a real touchy subject today, and hopefully I don't offend, but I mean, it's, if you're going to say something that's worth saying, in most cases, it's going to offend somebody. And it's funny how it seems like society has got away from that. It seems like the only things that you're allowed to say are things that do not offend. And I'm saying if you're going to be that way, if you're going to live that way, then you're probably never going to say much of anything worth hearing. And that's just my humble opinion. Maybe not so humble, but I believe it's pretty much factual if you think about it. Most of the time, if you step into a room, there's going to be a certain amount of people who will dislike you, even just by just seeing your face, maybe seeing your outfit, maybe just by you opening your mouth and realizing that you have a very high or a very low or very monotone voice. Do you understand? There's certain people that are just going to be turned off from things that you do or things that you are. First of all. So I'm just trying to preface everything I say that, basically what I'm trying to say is I'm not trying to offend anybody, but I'm just trying to keep it straight and keep it real. So I wrote down on a piece of paper and it says the black kid condition. And when I was writing that, I was referring to the condition in schools, prosperity, post-secondary education, family, relationships, and a whole bunch of stuff that goes on with that. And first of all, I will begin by living my own truth or speaking my own truth. I can say that I was raised in a two-parent family, the last of 4 children, so the baby of the family. There was a pretty big stretch between the first 2 and the second 2 as far as the children are concerned in my family. I can say that out of the 4 of us, 3 of us have admitted to being sexually interfered with from so-called friends of the family. My parents were immigrants from Jamaica and didn't know much about this system. They were very trusting when they came over, very green, I guess is the best way to put it, as many people who come from other countries are. Either they're overly skeptical, or they generally tend to be overly careful and overprotective. And I also come from a Christian home, raised in a Pentecostal church, a Bible-believing church, and I think sometimes the way that teaching would go back, say when I was growing up and before, is, trusting God, and you can trust Christians, your fellow brethren, and nothing should happen because we're believers. We're all believers, and the people you'd have around you, because you spent most of your time at church or in some type of religious setting or around people who are Christians. So therefore, you didn't think you had to be concerned about your children. And that's what I grew up in. And I could go further into that, but that's not really the point of this. I'm just giving you a little background on myself. So yes, I am black. I don't call myself African Canadian. I mean, I know people do. I just call myself a black guy, straight up. I can say that from my childhood, I was bullied from in the years of 10, 11, and 12 when I was at a public school in Toronto called Brookbanks Public School. It was, I guess, spurred on by actually two other black kids, and it was very noticeable what was happening to me. And funny enough, the teacher that I had at that time was a black teacher. He was an immigrant from not the West Indies, but I believe from South Africa or another country. Anyhow, he didn't like me too much, and I guess he displayed that by asking me whether or not I was stupid, cuffing me in the back of the head, pulling my ears. And I'm sure if there were ever reasons to do such things to people, I suppose in that era, I probably earned it at some points. Although when I look back on it and I think back about my psyche and my capacity of understanding of what was going on around me, I would say that I was fairly innocent. And it's not to make myself sound better or not, better or worse. I'm just trying to give you if I was looking back at myself, talking to my younger self, I would say, you're pretty naive, kid. And sadly, most people didn't understand that. I found that in most cases, even though I was asked if I was stupid many times by my teacher, there was many times when things would happen with me involved that I was treated like I actually knew more than I did. For whatever reason, I'm not sure, but I can tell you that was the truth that I lived. I can also say personally that I was a bedwetter. I actually wet the bed until I was 16. I actually decided on my 16th birthday that this couldn't happen anymore, and I went through, not really, I guess they wouldn't really be rigorous, but I made sure I went through some desperate measures. I got to the point where I was like, okay, you're this old. And it wasn't like I was wetting the bed every night at 16. It was still happening, if you understand. So to tell you the truth, and I mean, maybe your child is going through this, and here's a strategy that finally did it for me, for someone who went through it for a long period of time. And there were times in my younger days where it was almost virtually every night. We tried, and I don't know why I'm even talking about bedwetting, but I'm talking about it because maybe there's somebody who has a child or somebody who's going through it even right now, and they believe that they've tried everything. I can tell you that there was a drink that my mom had me drink at some point before I went to bed, and apparently I don't know what it was supposed to do, whether it was supposed to dehydrate me before it was bedtime so that I wouldn't have anything left to, pee the bed in the nighttime. We did the thing where I wouldn't drink anything for 2 to 3 hours before bed. Still wouldn't work. I can tell you what actually finally worked for me, and I'm not telling anybody else to do this, so listeners' discretion advised through this whole thing. This is for obviously entertainment purposes only, and it's just one guy's opinion. But I actually used to be a person who would sleep on their stomach, and that's where I slept. And at times I would sleep on my side. I had to make a conscious decision to start sleeping on my back at all times. Now, I can tell you from experience that didn't always work. I can tell you some horrible experiences about being a person who wet the bed lying on their back as a young boy. And you could fill in all the messed up things that could possibly happen. But yeah, I started to sleep on my back at 16 all the time. And maybe I believe that my bladder actually grew to handle my liquid consumption or whatever it was. I know that I was a very deep sleeper, so that didn't help either. I supposedly suffer from severe sleep apnea. So, I mean, if you're always totally exhausted and knocked out, then the chances of you being able to wake up just for a little twinkle in your abdomen telling you that you gotta pee, or your bladder, it's not very likely. So I might have had a few things going against me, but yeah, that's what I did. That's how I finally got over it. No matter than that, just a simple, I'm gonna lie on my back and I am not gonna wet the bed. And it wasn't that I was waking up in the middle of the night after that, going to the washroom. I was still having the same sleep habits, and for some reason it worked out for me. So there's that. The reason why I went back into my story a little bit, it was just to let you know that, growing up as a kid, I had a difficult time in school, and I was bullied. Sometimes I would come to work. I would come to school sweaty, or maybe smelling like urine, probably, because the bottom line is I didn't have time. I slept so sound that sometimes I just didn't have time to take a shower. So as disgusting as it sounded, I was a little dirty boy, and at times I would try to mask it with perfumes and colognes and all kinds of nonsense. I just didn't get in the shower, and there might have been some sort of delay, I could say, but what could I do? Both my parents were at work, and even if they weren't, I got to the point where I was trying to hide wetting the bed because it was embarrassing. And the times I would get in the shower, maybe my clothes weren't, the best, or whatever the case was, because of the care and where I was putting them and whatever it was, it just became a rough thing. So I know originally when I was being bullied, it wasn't because I was the smelly kid. Although it did work out that way. It was first because I was actually very popular. And the two people who started bullying me at school, which eventually became more than just the two people, because of course other people didn't want to be bullied. So it was like, it's either you pick on the kid who's being bullied, or guess what? You would become the kid that was being bullied. So of course other people joined in. But in grade 4, I remember being a popular kid. Grade 3, actually from grade 3 down to kindergarten, I had a lot of friends, and I was very friendly with a lot of the kids, and everything was great, I thought, until I got to grade 4. And then there was 2 new kids who came to school, and they happened to be cousins, and they bullied the hell out of me is the best way to put it. Now, I'm not like trying to display any sour grapes as to what happened, because I believe that going through all of that probably helped me become the person I am, and I'm actually probably better for it. Lord knows who I would have been without being humbled without having to humble myself, just being humbled on a whole. So I can say as a kid growing up, and yes, I had no clue how to study. My parents were very busy, either at work or with church, or just some of the other things with family. We also had my aunt move over from England, who brought her 5 kids, and eventually it ended up just being 4 of them, but they lived with us for, I would say, at least 4 or 5 years. But I mean, my math might be off, but they were there for quite a while, it seemed. I didn't get help with my schoolwork. I didn't know how to study. I didn't know what I was doing in most of my lessons most of the time. Now, I'm not sitting here saying nobody tried, so it was all about parental neglect or family neglect, because, as I said, I was the youngest, and I was now not only the youngest of 4, but I was also the youngest of at least 8, because of my cousins who were all older. And at times, I did have cousins who tried, and sisters who tried to help me with my work here and there, but I just wasn't getting it, and I guess it was frustrating, and I was left to my own devices. I was also given tutoring But I can honestly tell you the tutoring that I went to, which I guess it worked for some students, but it was like, okay, you don't know your times tables, you don't know your math. Okay, here's 2 sheets of math. Go sit over in that corner and just do some math. Then it's basically you sit there, your time's up, and then you go home. There was no actual tutoring at the tutor for me, for whatever reason. I don't know if that's how people tutored back then in those days or whatever it is, but that was my experience. So when I think about my experience, I can say that when I began to be bullied in grade 4, and I was 9 turning 10, I ended up being taken out of French so that I could get help with my math and English, my reading and my writing and my math, my arithmetic, all that stuff. And I can honestly say I really did like my special ed teacher. Now, the sad thing about being in special ed in the 80s is that everybody was lumped together. So you had a bunch of behavioral kids who, probably had ADHD or ADD. And then you had kids probably like me who were probably just different learners or slow learners mixed in with all the behaviors. You can understand that a child like me being in a class like that wouldn't learn much because there'd just be so many distractions again. And sadly, in those classes, a lot of time teachers have to spend so much time on the behaviors, and there was no such thing as a special ed assistant or an EA or whatever it is. Back in those days, it was just the teacher and a bunch of wild kids that would go to that class for one period a day. So what ended up happening to me was that because, let's say it was grade 4, and let's say my math or my English was at a grade 2 or 3 level, that I was missing the grade 4 level. And then, they promote you to grade 5. And then I didn't learn anything from grade 4 because I was working on the grade 2 and 3 stuff. So then I was back again, and it just kept happening over and over, year after year after. And then eventually you go to high school and you're certainly not at grade level. But of course, at that time, you have to all of a sudden take grade 9 math, right? For credits, grade 9 English. And back then we had advanced and we had general. And then there was basic, which is locally developed. And that's like really lower level. And, I can honestly tell you with all the gaps now, thinking of all the learning gaps that I had gaps because I wasn't learning anything at home. I had gaps because I was probably slower than the average kid. I was slower not slower. I had learning gaps because there was just certain things that I wasn't exposed to because I was taken out of the French to work on English. So then, of course, also grade 9, I had to do French. But I'd been taken out of French. So you can understand that it was like a snowball effect with my work. And I'm sure any listener that was in special ed for any amount of time, and when I say any amount of time, I mean over 1 or 2 or 3 years, can probably testify to the fact that when you're pulled out of the mainstream to work on stuff that the other kids aren't learning, you're gonna miss whatever it is they're learning when you're not there. It's just obvious. Like, probably the best thing for me would have been to be pulled out of gym. But of course, as a small child, you probably don't want to miss gym. But when I think back to it, I would have been better to go to French, be pulled out of gym, and maybe when they were doing math and English, maybe that time too, it was like, you look back and you just try to figure out how could they have fixed the situation for someone like me. And back then, there also weren't things like IEPs, individual education plans, where there are now. But, at the same time, I'm still saying the same thing, really, with students. They're still far behind their grade level once they get to high school. And it's just sad. And then there's the students who are not in special ed, but they're not succeeding at all. in what they're supposed to be doing. And that was the main focus of me actually talking tonight. It was wondering what's happening to Black children. And now, speaking as a Christian, I believe that nothing is ever going to be perfect in this society. I believe, as the Bible starts to say, and maybe you can look this up, where it says, in the last days, that men are going to be lovers of themselves. Yeah, somewhere. I think it's Timothy, 2 Timothy 2, or no, 2 Timothy 3, verse 2. It says in the last days, it says, people will be lovers of themselves, lovers of money, boastful, proud, abusive, disobedient to parents, ungrateful, and unholy. But basically, what I'm trying to show you is that nothing will be perfect. There'll be race wars, actual wars, rumors of wars. There will be, as we have cancel culture, where people are fighting against the so-called mainstream media. We'll have all of a whole bunch of usual issues that there have been in times past, except I believe things are escalating to a point where, I believe the coming of the Son of Man, the coming of Christ will come, and things will only escalate on this earth, I believe. Now, if you're a Christian, you probably understand what I'm saying, and if you're not, and if you've never heard any of this, then you probably think I'm speaking a whole load of baloney or whatever it is. But yes, as Christians, we believe that the Lord is going to come again for his people, and they will be caught up to meet him in the air. After a great trumpet sounds, we will literally vanish. That's what Christians believe. Now, you might be saying, whoa. But yes, we literally believe that there is a literal rapture, and we will be raptured from the earth and gone. But I'm saying all that to say, even though I'm talking about how things go on this earth, and how we, as people try to fix things on this planet, I realize that nothing's ever going to be perfect. People who don't believe in God will be still forever saying, okay, what about the dinosaurs? Or did God really make the earth and create everything in 6 days? And Christian will say, yes, he did. And there'll be so many different discrepancies between the beliefs, and a lot of this stuff will probably end up being very nebulous to the grand scheme of things when I look at it. But I didn't want to speak about this because, I've really wondered, as a Black kid growing up in school, I was wondering, why did I always see so many kids have such a tough time in school? And, I even had a conversation with my son and asking him, how did he see it? Him being 25 years younger than I am, how did he see it growing up in the late 90s and early 2000s? How did it work out? And I'm just going to read off some little bit of this, a little bit of that here and there, but I can honestly tell you, from a person who dealt with special ed, I can say teaching special ed is a talent most special ed teachers don't have. A lot of special ed teachers I know personally have come through their programs by way of maybe being a CYW or an early childhood education teacher, and then they kind of slid through, got a degree. They took, I think it's called special ed 1 or 2 or both of them, and became special ed teachers. And not to say that they really didn't go to teachers college, because they did, but it's like you could get a early childhood education degree undergrad, or you could also get one in child youth workers degree, and then you could get to teachers college and you could become a teacher and you could slide in the door, because to tell you the truth, a lot of the teachers who were teaching the neurotypical mainstream students didn't want to work with children that might be nonverbal, or kids who looked different, or kids who would whack them over the head because they were living with autism. And so what ended up happening is sometimes the very best teachers never actually teach the slow kids, the autistic kids, and so on. Now you might say, well, maybe those aren't the best teachers, but I would beg to differ. Yes, the ones who actually eventually do work in special ed tend to have 10 times more patience because of what, they deal with in a day-to-day basis, and maybe it takes a special person in that sense. But, I will say that it's said often that everyone says the plan is, when a kid is put in special ed, and varying from the autism part of it, just kids who are slow and in special ed, the plan is that we will get the child caught up and eventually integrate them back into regular programming with reading, writing, and arithmetic. But in most cases, I'm saying, it never happens. And when it does happen, which is rare, usually it's not very successful, because as someone who's been there, you usually end up with a lot of learning gaps. I can specifically point to the issues that I have with my learning, like when we check out grammar and punctuation and all those things that I was supposed to learn. I was in special ed, and I was learning the basics of other things like spelling and other things, or I was being bullied. So even if I was learning these things, chances are I wasn't paying attention because I was being, and I said bullied. I wasn't being physically bullied because I was athletic and I was not a big kid, but I was always, any kid knew that if they were going to fight me, they weren't going to come out of the fight unscathed. So it was more of the psychological bullying, which I think I could have taken a couple broken noses or even a broken arm and been more normal in my school years than I was with the psychological bullying of, say, 5 or a whole class of kids plus a teacher. So that was my experience. And, when I look at the kids now, I try to figure out, what is it? Why a lot of the black kids don't even want to graduate or really care if they graduate, or why do they concentrate more on just skipping school? Like, what is it out there that they're trying to accomplish? Why they have such a low value of school? So remember, it's just me trying to kind of think about, the things that would have done this, and why it's like a continuing thing. Because I can say, back when I was in school, I would say for 90% of the black population that I saw and paid attention to, we were all trying to graduate and trying to go to college or trying to go to university. And in most cases it was college, but we were trying to do something after high school. It wasn't high school and then forget it, like back in our days, we did have hoop dreams, but it's like, we were in Canada and basketball wasn't even a thing here. And even if we could play hockey, most of us, because we're coming from immigrant families, couldn't afford to join any hockey leagues or whatever anyways. And some played soccer, but the quality of the sports in Canada at that time in the 80s wasn't very good anyway. So it was very far between kids who would actually get anywhere with any type of sport from Toronto, from where I'm coming from. So I know it might be a difference. Well, it is a big difference, like say in the States where, you guys had Pop Warner football and stuff. We didn't have like Little League football, and if you did it, again, it was a very select few kids that got to experience those things in Toronto. And then if you were like a kid like me whose family was mostly involved in the church, then a lot of that outside, extracurricular stuff was basically foreign to my family. So I wouldn't even have known where to sign up or who to talk to get me in a football league at 12, or where to, get this or that to do different things athletically, even if I was athletically inclined, which I was to a certain extent. But now it's like I look and I say, most kids that are behind by high school find other things to occupy their time. Like they got hoop dreams, some got rap dreams, some got car dreams. They're not even thinking about whatever. They just want to get a car. They want to be 16. They want to have some freedom. Some have girl dreams. Some have boy dreams. And then there's the Insta dreams. And there's the TikTok dreams, etc. It's like social media, the phones, the cell phones, those amazingly interesting little demons. It's funny that the Latin word for demon is daimon, and daimon means intelligence. And it's funny that they're called smartphones. And the funny thing is that the smartphones are making dumb people. I mean, how many phone numbers do you understand and remember now? How many times have you Googled stuff, and the stuff that you Googled, or just to get some insight on a certain thing, you've had to Google it again later on because you forgot? Like, our information is so microwavable that it's hard to maintain and grasp the learning that you're getting, Like, I honestly don't know how I would have fared if I had a cell phone at my fingertips to do my bidding, to do whatever I feel like doing, to look up or watch whatever, movies at your fingertips. Back in the day, we had to find a TV. We had to find a working VCR. A lot of time we'd have to show up at a video store or a Blockbuster because we really didn't own that many videos back in the day to watch something. Now, a kid could be sitting in class and on their data and be watching something from Netflix. Now, how distracting would that be? But also, if you're noticing that, nobody really, you feel like your teachers don't want you around, which I can honestly tell you that a lot of kids feel that way. Like, what learning are you doing? You have friends in other classes texting you. You have meetups in the hallway because you have cell phones, so you can say, meet me on the south side of the school at such and such a time. And, all you basically have to do to have a rendezvous at school is, text somebody and both ask to go to the washroom at the same time from two different classes. And it's that simple. I don't know if it's ever going to happen. I don't know if it's possible this time, but I can honestly say cell phones need to be banned from schools if they really want students to learn, because some have learned to deal with them. Some have learned responsibility and learned that high school is just a stepping stone until your future, and some kids haven't learned that at all, and they're obviously following in the footsteps of their parents who are on their cell phones 90% of the time as well. Kids are not eating with their parents. And then there's the whole thing of welfare. And a lot of kids are being raised in one-parent homes or single-parent homes. And, there's incentive. There's incentive for people being occupational parents, taking care of their children, because they know for every child, I think you probably get an extra additional $300 or $400. So the more kids you have, so if you have 3, 4, 5 kids, even by 3 or 4, 5 different fathers, you will get a certain amount of money. And I can honestly tell you from what I know, a lot of the time these people keep relationships, but they let the government know that everything's totally severed. the guy will have to work his whatever job that he's doing and send money, and the government will also send money. And a lot of these women have no intention on having an actual father figure in the home for an extended period of time. And I can tell you that a lot of kids from the Black culture are being raised by single parents, and every once in a while you have a different male stepping in that is not the child's father, who is not respected as the child's father, and may not be around for very long, but just long enough to maybe have another child. And it's not every case, of course. But the way that the support system is there for single parents and not there for, say, parents of, say, my era who didn't excel in high school, didn't excel in college, weren't able to get into a program that would have them being paid over $50,000 a year. And I mean, if you put that together with someone who maybe barely finished high school or did the same thing, you're having a whole household being run by two people when they put their money together, even though they didn't learn to save and didn't learn money management and how to handle and deal with credit, making $60,000 together, which doesn't qualify very much, not even generally qualifying for the child tax benefits or whatever it is. It's like it's just a cycle, and I can say that students in school, when you look at the athletes, and after asking my son about what he was dealing with in school, he said that black kids just they played their sports, and beyond that there wasn't very many clubs that many of them wanted to deal with. And I'm talking about kids in the 2000s. Most didn't want to be in the chess club, most didn't want to be in the debate team, and they go on and on and on. And even with the sports, it's like you'll have a bunch of kids who excel at basketball, speaking about black kids, and it's still a lot of them will be cut from the team because a lot of time the coaches want to put the tall Chinese kid or the tall brown kid or the tall white kid who maybe doesn't have all the skill, but because of the height sometimes, and you'll have skilled players who are shorter, but because those positions are kind of already duplicated, not making the team. But of course, that's not going to happen in chess or in the debate or math teams or, or robotics teams. If you have no clue or you're not good, just because you're, ambidextrous, it doesn't mean that you're going to be on the robotics team, if you understand what I mean. And there's just so many or so little places for black kids to excel. So from the issues that go on at home and relationally and the cell phones, there's so many things to keep a kid distracted. And that's what I'm finding, is that many kids are just distracted and they don't know how to study. They don't know or how to set aside time to study. I can say that most of the kids are not seeing the black staff. Now, yes, they're seeing the black staff. What was the old joke that they used to say? And this is when I was growing up. They said, what do you call a black guy in university? And the answer was a caretaker, right? Now, some may laugh still at that joke, right? Some may not find that joke funny at all, but it used to be a reality, and it's still somewhat of a reality. Whereas, yes, you have some black caretakers, and you also have black support staff, which are usually females. And there'll be very few black males in the school, and very few black teachers on a whole. And if you do, sad to say, and you may not agree, and if you're a teacher, you might say, okay, what is he talking about? But what I've realized, and people can deny it if they want, a lot of the black teachers who become black teachers, or even principals, like that's even like almost unheard of, but not totally. Usually there's a certain amount, a certain level of buy-in to the system that is in place for those people to excel. So I'm not literally going to say that they're washed, but anyone from Toronto who has had a black teacher in their education growing up have noticed in most cases there is a certain level of washedness that comes with that. And again, I'm not really saying like I don't have all the answers, but I understand the struggle. There is not much of a authentic West Indian black representation in schools for children to say, yeah, that teacher gets me. He understands where I'm coming from. He comes from where I come from. He speaks the same language or dialect that I speak. He listens to the same music. He attends the same type of church. It goes on and on and on. He listens to the same music. He gets me, he gets the culture, he gets my fashion. You know, a lot of that is just not there for the black kids. So then, of course, they're feeling disenfranchised. And it's just a reality. And I'm hoping there's something we can do. Now, yes, in a lot of schools, there are the support staff. There are CYWs and EAs that are black. But of course, at the schools, they're also dealing with a hierarchical system in the school boards, meaning that there's minimal respect given to support staff or caretakers. So even if you see them, it's like, oh, Mr. John, or they're calling you by your first name around students, whereas they don't do that to teachers. There's a certain level of respect that support staff doesn't have in front of the students. So therefore, they don't really hold that much weight when students are looking for an adult black person to respect in their school. They're not seeing it because they're noticing that the support staff aren't getting the respect from the other staff members, the so-called team. Anyhow, this is my 2 cents on the subject, and I know I veered and I went around from here to there and everywhere, and I guess it probably would be more focused if I was actually speaking to someone and I could actually ask a few questions. So I think I might do that. I think I might bring on my son if this podcast has been beneficial and I notice it as far as the plays and the downloads are concerned. Then yes, there will be a part 2 to this one, and I know that I do make podcasts and I say part 1 but the reason why there is no part 2 is if I don't see that there is a need for it, I just don't do it at the end of the day. But I will be revisiting this topic because I touched on a lot of different things I understand, and if you really want to get a different view than what is being put out, different than the narrative that is being put out about, say, welfare or education or slavery or black youths or whatever it is, check out Thomas Sowell's information or his books or his interviews or his teachings. And not to say that I'm a big Thomas Sowell fan or anything like that, but you might get a different point of view than that one that is being put out. Because think about it. This same point of view is out there. This narrative is out there as to why black kids can't prosper and black families can't prosper. But yet, if all this information's been out there all of this time, why aren't things changing? Why is the main go-to still athletics, sports, the humanities? Like, why are those the 3 small, healthcare? And of course, it's generally not doctors. You know, a lot of PSWs and nurse assists and CYWs and EAs and customer service clerks and salespeople. That's generally the jobs that most black people have, or if they're lucky, they're a so-called public servant or working for the government at a mid-range to low-level job. But it would be nice to see some black people excel, I'm saying. So understand, I respect all cultures. I respect my culture. I respect the fact that people work hard, and I respect people who just work hard at their jobs and do a good, honest day's job or honest day's work. People who aren't ripping off other people or taking advantage of other people, but they're just doing the job. They're doing what is before them, knowing that as a Christian, that this earth, this world is ever changing, and there is something beyond this world for many of us. Well, for all of us, but the thing beyond this world for many is not going to be pretty. And that's not a threat, it's a promise, it's a reality. If you want to learn more about Christianity, I would say look up Grace to You or Pastor John MacArthur and see all the stuff that's out there that you can listen to or watch, and his questions and answers, general questions or specific questions. He's done many volumes on questions and answers from the Christian faith for regular Bible-believing Christians, and even for Catholics and people who are Muslim faith, or people who are atheist or agnostic or Hindu or Muslim or Sikh or Sikh, Buddhist, like the whole gambit of religions that are out there, the belief systems, the ideologies. But it'd be nice, as I said before, and I guess I'm being a dead horse, but it'd be nice to see some prosperity in some of the other areas for Black children. It would be nice to see Black children engaged and families engaged and staying married. Oxymoron, whatever. But it would be nice to see families stay together and raise children the correct way. And anyhow, that's my 2 cents. And if you don't agree with me, well, you're probably right. I mean, it is just one person's opinion, right? Anyhow, till next time, this is MCM signing off. Take care. Hey, come check out You Probably Right podcast. Society is getting more unpredictable every day, but at the same time, predictable in its unpredictability. Say that 4 times real fast. Come with me as I attempt to find clarity in all the fog while staying way outside the box and kicking the box way down the road with my size 12 dogs. I use the Bible, experience, education, fortune, misfortune, life's lessons, life's mistakes to sort through all the mess. I talk about news, God, God, self-help, sports, sickness, health, music, parenting, love, humbleness, hurt, pain, joy, and all the things that might make you say, I never thought of it that way. Hopefully, anyway. Also, I take a stab at answering tough and not so tough questions, and all the while understand that, listen, sometimes you end up in the hot seat and there's no thermostat. Well, that's how it is here. And because there's no topic, very few topics off the table, Torontonians will understand that Doug Ford reference there. Hopefully the podcast will be helpful and uplifting. And hey, maybe you'll find your own private Idaho here somewhere. Hope to see you soon.